Good afternoon, PDHPE, and welcome to the next lesson in this new topic that we're studying this term, risky business. So this term we've decided that we're going to look at this topic of taking positive and negative risks. Last lesson we had a look at various different scenarios, and you all had a go at looking what were some of the positive risks in that situation and what were some of the negative risks in that situation. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to develop that skill even further by learning what exactly the decision process we go through when we make these sorts of decisions. We'll also look at some of the influential factors that contribute to how we make our decisions regarding positive or negative risks. So here we go. We're going to start on page 7, where it says, taking risks, is it worth it? Learning how to assess risk is a process that we work on throughout our lives. Taking risks involves fear and uncertainty, of course, because we don't always know what the outcome is going to be at the end. A lot of you shared that you had tried out for a singing competition or tried out for a sports team. You didn't know whether you were going to get in or not, but it was good for you to take that risk because we grow from these experiences. So that's what this next point is going to say. So this alone should not stop us, even failure and can help a person grow and mature. Consider the following saying: to try and fail is yet to learn. To try is never to fail. To try is to never know what might have been. So what do you think that might mean? To try and fail is yet to learn, but to fail to try is to never know what might have been. That's right. So if you don't try, you would never know what the outcome could have been. But at least if you tried and you failed, you still grow from that experience. So when deciding whether or not to take a risk, you should consider the possible consequences to yourself and others. It can be helpful to follow the steps in the decision-making process below. So we go through this decision process unconsciously most of the time. We don't necessarily go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but it's good to know what steps we take when we make these decisions. So the first step is to, similarly to what we've done in the drugs and alcohol unit, is to state the problem. So what decision needs to be made? The second thing, you need to gather information about the options available to you. The third key is to examine the different options available to you using the information that you have at hand. So maybe you're contemplating whether or not to join a sports team. Maybe you're contemplating whether or not to do another course as a side thing to doing school. So is it going to take up too much of your time? Are you able to balance your studies? Are you able to balance your studies and your home life and your church commitments, or what are the other commitments that you have outside of school? Step 4 is to consider the consequences of each option. That is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each? What are you going to get from this? And what's the cost? Because all decisions are going to cost something. Step 5, select the best option for you and take action. And step 6, evaluate your decision to see if it was the right one for you to take. So now that I'm older, I tend to do this process quite unconsciously. So I often reflect on decisions that I've made in that day, and I said, was that the right decision? If I had that opportunity to do that again, what would I do differently? Okay, so these are some risk-taking guidelines. Consider all of the changes and consequences of taking the risk and make a plan that includes other alternatives. So have a plan B, even a plan C, just in case plan A doesn't go ahead. Evaluate your limits and abilities. So you might want to go to a party, but you can't drive, so you need to consider mum and dad and what time you're going to come home and that sort of thing. If assessing the risk is worth taking, be brave and act in spite of fear of the unknown. That's really important, and I spoke about this last lesson, is that we don't have a spirit of fear because God has given us a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. So fear shouldn't hinder us from making the right decisions. Don't take a dangerous or unhealthy risk to prove yourself to other people. Now, this is really important because being a young person, we have a lot of media, we have peer pressure, and different things that speak to us, music, all of these sorts of things that tell us what kind of person we should be and how we should behave. But we don't need to prove ourselves to anyone, because all we need to do is to live for God and grow to be the person that God's called us to be, not who we think we should be. Don't blame others for your failures. It's okay to take responsibility. Things don't always go to plan, and we can take responsibility in that. Don't give up too early, and don't be pressured into taking risks. So another thing that I made a note of is what we can also do for a risk-taking guideline is we can ask people, we can ask our parents, we can ask our youth leaders, we can ask our older siblings of what they might do in a particular situation. In Proverbs 11 verse 14 says, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." So what that verse is trying to say is that if we talk to a few people about our what decision we want to make, we're most likely going to have a safe answer rather than making just a flimsy decision out of impulse or out of pressure. And we can also pray about our decisions. We can ask God, what does He think about it? Sometimes I do that famous acronym WWJD. What would Jesus do? I often ask myself, what would Jesus do in this situation? Especially when I want to talk to someone about the gospel or share the gospel with someone. I often get really, really scared and afraid. But it's a positive risk-taking experience because I get to share what Jesus done for them by dying on the cross for their sins. So we can ask God, and we can look to the Bible. In James it says that if we lack wisdom, we can always ask God for wisdom because He gladly gives it to us. He says that in James 1 verse 5. So there's some of the risk-taking guidelines. Here we have a critical thinking activity, and I'd like you to go ahead and do that critical thinking activity. So you can put this video on pause, and we can come back and we can continue on with the lesson. Or alternatively, you can just watch this video through and do the activity afterwards. Okay, so literacy activity. So these are some of the different factors that can influence us in making a positive or negative risk-taking decision. So here we have self-concept. So the way that we think of ourselves definitely influences the way that we take whether we do or don't take positive risks or negative risks. So let's write here. Okay, so you can copy my answer or you can write your own. But basically, if someone has a positive self-esteem, a positive self-look upon themselves, then they're less likely to take a negative risk-taking decision. They're not going to do something silly or stupid because they know they're better than that. Family. Our family often influence us to take positive risk-taking decisions because they want us to grow in our confidence and grow in self-esteem to be better people. Okay, what about media? Do you think media encourages us to have a positive risk, encourages us with positive risk taking? Perhaps. But more often than not, it's quite negative. So I think that media influences us to to take negative risks. Like it encourages us. There's a lot of there's a lot of media about drinking. There's a lot of media about you know having sex outside of marriage and those sorts of things. So I think media encourages us to take the wrong risks in life. So you can make a note of that. I won't do it for every single one. The law. So the law, there's strong laws against drink driving, and that might influence young people to deter from making decisions to drink drive because they know that they might lose their license as a result of that. Culture, especially being Australian, we often, where drinking alcohol is such a part of Aussie culture. A lot of young people feel as though that they're just embracing that culture, and so that can influence them to take some negative risks. Peers, we can often fall into peer pressure. So you might want to write a comment about that peers can influence us to take negative risks because we feel like we need to be like them or we need to live up to their standard. But they can also encourage us. Previous experience. So if you see someone who's made a bad decision and they got hurt or injured from that decision, like for example, your parents said don't climb up the ladder because it's wobbly, and your older brother decided to climb up the ladder anyway, so that's a negative risk. And then they fell and broke their leg. You're less likely going to do the same thing because you've seen someone had a negative experience, and likewise a positive experience for a different situation. Gender. So gender does play a role, only because it's statistically speaking, males tend to take more negative risky behavior on the roads than females would. So gender does play a role, so you want to make a note of that. Also, I'd like you to do this personal reflection on the next page, and but just simply say yes or no to each one. Do you feel pressured to make risky choices by friends? Do you rush into decisions? Do you think it's uncool to try things in a safe manner? Are dangerous risks more exciting to you than healthy challenges? Do you make dangerous choices to impress others? Do you consider the reasons why you want to take the risk before deciding? Do you think about the skills and information needed to take the risk? Do you think about the consequences of taking the risk? Like for example, injury, learning more about yourself, etc. And then once you've done that and you've completed that other activity on the previous page, then that's it for this lesson. So until next lesson, I'll see you then and make positive risk-taking decisions. Bye for now.